guys, this is me, Malorian, and this is going to be another Warmachine 101. This is where I take your questions and I answer them. So, I have a lot of them here. They're coming from the Mr. Malorian Facebook page, and I'm going to start going through these. Now, the first one here is going to be coming from my buddy Charles Watt, and he asked, Malorian, could you talk about the Alpha Strike? You know, what is it, why is it so important, and how do I get better at it? Well, the Alpha Strike, it really talks about the whole premise and the idea of being the first one to get the attack off. The one who's going to be the first one up on attrition, the first one out of the gates, you know, drawing first blood, however you want to be saying it, is getting that first real attack. And that's huge, right? Getting that first initial jump up on attrition. This is really a game where whoever gets in there first usually kills the other guy. Sure, you have cases where like one side is just a little Legionnaire, the other side's a full Jack. So of course the Legionnaire is not going to kill the Jack on the Alpha. But for really infantry on infantry, heavies on heavies, in general, the first one in there is going to win and take out the other. So it's really important to set that up. So there's a couple of different ways you can set up the Alpha Strike. The first one being knowing your threat ranges, right? Making sure that you understand that if I have a longer threat range than you, I can stand at my threat range and be totally safe from you. And either you can back off and give me more of the board, or you can stand there and I'll get that Alpha Strike and take you out. So that's really important to understand, and not really just even just the numbers on the cards, also things like interactions with terrain, and also rules and spells and animus that could really come together, right? You might look at something and say like, oh, well, it's speed 6, doesn't have reach, so it's going to threat 9.5 inches. Okay, so if I'm 10 inches out, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden, they have, you know, rush, or if they do leash, or anything that kind of really speed that thing up, you know, slipstream, they're on you, and that's bad, right? So you have to know all these things, and a lot of times you can just ask your opponent, like, okay, let's get past all the bull. What's the farthest threat you can get with this? And they'll probably tell you, you know, by the tournament rules, they just have to give you the cards, and like, here, figure it out for yourself on your own clock. But most people are like, oh yeah, you know, I got this spell, and I got this, and I get this, so this is the top threat. Because, you know, most of us aren't jerks, and it's not, I mean, we'd rather not sit there for 10 minutes looking at you look at cards, right? Especially if it's just a casual game, not even a tournament. Why would you even do that, right? Just like, yeah, let's just waste a bunch of time. So that's a big part there, just the knowledge aspect. The other part of it is also the piece trading. So if you are dealing in a spot where they have a longer threat range, the way that you're going to get the Alpha Strike on what's really important, let's say you're heavy on their heavy, is by piece trading. You're going to put your infantry out first, they're going to come into the infantry and stall, and then your heavy can take out their heavy, and hooray, everything worked out just perfect. Now, this is where the game gets to be a lot like chess, where your pawns are trying to take out their pawns so that your key pieces can take out their key pieces, and it gets a lot more complex. But the biggest thing you have to always be keeping in mind is what's the end of the piece trade? What am I trying to do here? Sure, you know, he charged in with some infantry here and killed your infantry, and you could kill them by sending in your heavy, but then you're going to lose your heavy. Maybe it's more important that you just throw in one more infantry guy to stall for a turn and try and get ahead on that infantry attrition, so that in the end you can get that piece trade that you're after. So really be looking at those. Plus, if you're a list that's running all heavies and no infantry, you're really running that risk that you just can't play that piece trade game. I mean, other than putting one heavy a little bit more far forward and then trying to say like, okay, you'll come in, kill that one heavy, I can kill off your heavies, you know, that type of a piece trade, it gets really more, when you're starting off that high of a value of a piece, it's really hard to be up at the end of it. So there's that part. Hopefully, Charles, I answered your question. Of course, shooting throws is all out of whack because shooting has a super long threat that you can't really adjust for. But yeah, there you go. There is your Alpha Strike. Now, next one here comes from Matthew Horton, and he asks, how do you prepare for your first tournament ever? I have one coming up in a week and have no clue what the meta is. So I have to make some assumptions here. I have to assume that if it's your first tournament, that you're probably a new-ish player. You know, maybe you've been playing for a year, but this is now your first time going to a tournament. You know, so you probably don't have a huge mastery of what the meta is, I'm guessing, or a huge mastery of what you'd usually be seeing at a tournament. Now, I think the first thing to do when you're going into this is realize that I'm sure the first time that you go to a tournament, you have your big star eyes out, and you're like, I'm going to win first place, I'm going to get a trophy, this is going to be awesome. Just settle and say, like, you know what, this is my first tournament. What I want this to be is a learning experience. I'm going to go in there, especially if you don't know what the meta is going to be like, what to expect. Just say, hey, I'm going to bring in my best, and I'm just going to see what happens. Odds are, I'm probably going to go 1-3 or something like that, and that's okay. That's fine. This is my first tournament. I'm getting used to it. Now, to prepare for it, if you don't know what the meta is, you could go more into this, and you could be trying to investigate. You know, if this is at another club, you could be starting to go and check out their forums. You could start talking to people over there, right? If there is a gaming night over there before the tournament, normally people are playing all their lists, trying to prepare. You could go there and start practicing and seeing what you're going to expect. Make sure that you build your list for it. But again, I'm going to go back to those assumptions of this is your first tournament ever. You should really just be concentrating on you, on yourself. Make sure that you have 2 lists that you're very comfortable with, because there'll be other stuff going on at the tournament, right? It's not just a one-off game. You have to be worried about, like, okay, I'll have to go over to this table. Okay, now I have to go here for judging. Okay, am I going to leave this here while I go for lunch, or am I going to repack? Right, you're going to have other things in your mind. Don't worry about so much about looking out at the meta and trying to counter the meta. I would say that in your first tournament, just worry about yourself. Now, we have some other tips from people down below, saying, like from Dorian Clampa here, saying he recommends to bring snacks and so forth to it, especially if it's a longer event. Then you'll definitely want to have those. Maybe I'll mix in this other question because it is very closely related. Richard Potter says, for longer tournaments, 4+ rounds, what is your routine during the day to keep yourself sharp and alert for later rounds? And so this is really probably a lot different. It is the same because it's tournament based, but we're having in one case where it is your first tournament ever, and on the second one, we're probably, if you're going to something that's 4+ rounds, you know, it's a larger event. Hopefully your first tournament's not a larger event, you have something to ease you into it, but for your first tournament, you want to focus on yourself. You want to make sure you have all your materials with you. So you have the 2 lists you're the most comfortable with. You make sure that you have your score sheet, you know, with your lists, and that you have all of your templates, and you have your markers. You have a clock if you need it. Make sure you look at that tournament package to understand what the schedule is, what the scoring system is, what you're expected to do. Like, oh boy, I was supposed to have my army list in a week before. I better go and do that type thing, right? So those basic things. Moving and transitioning into Richards then, if you're preparing for a longer tournament, and again, maybe that longer tournament is your first one, you do want to make sure you have things like snacks with you. Sure, they might have a lunch at one of the points there, but if you're playing multiple rounds, it really is like a battle of attrition against yourself. You want to make sure that you have a few granola bars in your bag maybe, bring some extra drinks, or make sure you have change to be buying drinks in between rounds. You know, you might also want to look, sometimes what's nice to have for these longer events is ensure that you have one your list, which is like a fast assassination list. So it's like, okay, boom, I'll go for this cane to assassination, game's over, let's go rest. And, you know, that's probably something with it too, where sometimes you might just want to go rest. If you're 3 games into this tournament, you have 1 or 2 more games more to go, you might want to go to your buddies and talk about your game and the great things you did and see what crazy things they did. It might be good just to go outside, get some silence, and just be able to just relax and kind of like reset yourself for the next game. Also, it could be really, really hot, especially in these tournaments that have lots of people. Remember that each person gives off the heat of 1 light bulb, and so if you have all those light bulbs going, that can be a very, very hot venue. So make sure that you're not dressed with like, hey, I'm going to be wearing this sweater on, because odds are you're going to overheat. And again, between rounds, you probably want to stay hydrated, not just because you're thirsty, but because you have to cool yourself down, or you have to get outside the building and try and cool yourself down, depending on how it is, right, with the weather there. But yeah, that's a bigger one there. Trying to stay alert between games is so much probably as well. Don't be focusing so much on the past. Don't so much be focusing on what put you on tilt. If you got through a game, whether you won or lost, you want to take a second to, of course, reflect on what happened, right? Okay, I won or lost because this happened, but stop that going into the next game. Make sure you have a pause and a break, because if you're thinking about game 3 as you're going into game 4, you're going to make mistakes. Unless it's something like, in game 3, I forgot to pop feet. I better make sure to pop feet this time. That's fine, but it's like, oh man, I had bad dice then, I have bad dice now. Oh, this is going to throw you off your game, and you're going to make mistakes. But in general, I've gone on this for about 10 minutes now. First tournament, make sure you're focusing on yourself and that you just have everything there and make an experience. Enjoy your first tournament. If you're an experienced tournament goer and you're going to larger conventions and stuff with longer, 5+ rounds and stuff like that, make sure that you go to those next steps and that you bring your snacks, bring your drinks, take time to escape, and just to be able to reset yourself. So there you go, like 10 minutes, but hopefully you guys like those answers. All right, next one here comes from Donald Schaefer, and he says, how do you respond to people who say the game has reached a breaking point? Now, people have said this in a couple of different ways. Some people have said that it's a breaking point because now you're at a point where there's some casters that are so powerful that they're overshadowing new ones that came in. So if we're talking about that, I think that's actually corrected what they're doing with the erratas now. Seeing that they're doing things to scale back Haley 2, Denny 2, Bradigus, Privateer Press has actively gone out there to create, or to correct that rather. So with that in place, I don't think that's a breaking point anymore. We're at a good spot with this, where if something does start to get a little bit too powerful, we know that Privateer Press is going to correct it. So we're looking pretty good there. The other part, however, is the whole thing where some people say that, well, there's so many models now that when something new comes out, it's competing with so many different things that it's not really worthwhile anymore. I don't think we're there. Not even close yet. At some point we will hit that, where we have so many units and so many heavies that one more won't really matter. But Privateer Press has been very good at try and not only bring in new ideas, like let's bring in a battle engine caster, or bring in casters that are units, and really bring in other kind of like units that act in weird ways, but as well, casters are focused on different things within a faction, so that units that normally would be like, well, they're kind of overshadowed by this, now when you bring them into these cases, they really shine. And so they're really doing a really good job of making it so that I can take any unit and find a good use for it somewhere, right? So there's some people that are naysayers about that with Privateer Press, but I guess whether it comes from the rule balance or the number of models, we're in a very, very good spot, and I think that we're still good for like another 5 years at least. And 5 years in a game at least is a long time. And then there could be Mark III, they could do all this stuff. So I have no worries about the Warmachine game in those terms. He has a second part of the question here. It says, what do you do when people complain about theme forces? But I like my theme force and wouldn't like it if theme forces were taken out of competitive play. Theme forces, at their core, are very, very good because they give you options. Theme forces say, hey, you want to play something fluffy by the book because you love the backstory? Great, here's a way to do it. Or, do you want to find a different way to play this caster? Here's a completely different way. Sure, you can take Magnus, Epic Magnus, and in his one regular list, you can take your mercenaries, but here's a different one where you could be taking long gunners, and you can be taking Idrian skirmishers, and you can go crazy. Or in this one here, you can do this, and it makes it really, really interesting. The issue with theme forces is that they're giving benefits, right? They're saying, I'm going to give you limited models, and to give you a positive for this, I'm going to give you a benefit. And Privateer Press is always a very very dangerous dance they do, because if you're too limited or you don't offer enough, it's useless. Nobody's going to really look at it, and they're just going to kind of turn their back on it. If you give enough, where it's like, okay, here's a pretty good benefit, but you're still kind of restricted, people are still going to be kind of like turning up their nose on it. Usually it might come up the odd time, but that's where you want it to be, where it's like a possibility, but it's not the obvious choice. And then, of course, the next step is if you give way too much or don't limit it enough, everybody jumps on board. And so a great example of that is that Calandra tier that we had here that they did correct, but that was the Calandra one where you get all these lights and they're a point off and they're all getting an advanced deploy, and when you give them all these benefits, you'd be silly not to take it. Another good example is the Veil 2 tier, where you pretty much never see Veil 2 at a tier. You just always see her in tier. So, okay, this is because the tier is so good. Now, does that mean that tiers need to be removed and they're bad for the game? No, not at all. It's just Privateer Press has to be very active and very proactive to make sure that they are always looking ahead when they're releasing a tier list to understand and playtest that it's not going to be super overpowered, and then if they do accidentally release something, errata it. And I believe now, again, that we're in a very good spot. The tiers that were crazy have been corrected. Veil 2 still hasn't been corrected, but again, you don't see a lot of Veil 2 anyway, so maybe it's not a big, huge deal. So, again, if they have a huge problem with it, just point them towards the erratas. Look, it's all being fixed. This is a different way to play, and yeah, I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere, right? If you think that a tier list is crazy because, oh wow, with Kane 1, I can get my gun mages for a point cheaper and they're unlimited, yeah, that's pretty cool and awesome, but if all I have is a whole bunch of gun mages, I can't always get through everything, right? Especially now in an age where we have Colossals and I can't even push them or damage them, right? It'd be, you have to take all this plus and minus out and just realize that too, like, hey, if I didn't do this tier and I wasn't limited, I could be putting in this and this and this and this and this. So I can either take the good stuff from here or the good stuff from there. It's up to you, and just realize you have good stuff as well. That's a big part with this. A lot of times people like to focus on others and then they're blind to what their own stuff does. Every faction has good tier list. Every faction has really good options. And so if they're going to go and point fingers at you, you can just go and point those fingers right back and say, well, did you realize that you could be doing this tier list, but you don't for whatever reason? You can be a purist and say, oh no, you should just be playing by the book and no extra tiers. But guess what? Those tiers are themeless. They're actually in the book as well. They're part of the game. So get with it. This is the game we're playing. So there you go. Tier themeless, good for the game, should be played. Bob Smith says, faction burnout, how do you deal with it? Now, faction burnout can definitely come from a couple of things. It can come from playing a list so much that you just get kind of bored with it and burnt out to the point it's like, I just don't really want to play them anymore. Or also burnt out where it's like, you know what? People know my faction now. They know what I do. Every single time I bring this faction to the gaming night, people are already prepared and teched against me. I'm just burnt out because it doesn't seem like I'm getting the same enjoyment from this because people are just countering me before I even get there. Well, probably the best way to fix this is that if it's faction burnout, try a different faction. First of all, I guess before that, you could try to really just find out that weird crazy spot in your faction that you haven't looked at yet, right? If you are a person who are playing Signar and you're like, yeah, Kane 2, Haley 2, whatever else, Siege, I just play those all the time. Try other casters. Try something to spice something up. Say like, hey, I'm going to do a Nemo today. I'm going to do a Constance. I'm going to do a Sloan. And just find those new parts in your list. Really, whenever you go and you're looking at something and your mind says like, oh, I should be doing this instead. No, stop yourself. Say, we're going to make this work. I'm going to randomly open this up and I'm going to see that I just drew out randomly the Long Gunner UA. Normally, I'd be like, I don't want that, throw it back. No, how am I going to make this work? Well, all of a sudden, if I have this UA, I can go and I can be putting down a template for Sturgis to draw things in. I can be running this with, say, like another control list. So let's say I'm running with double storm walls and long gunners, or even single storm wall and long gunners between their covering template, the Black 13th covering template, and the storm walls ones. You know, I'm covering like the whole board, and then once they try running around that, then pew 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 pew, I shoot them all up with the long gunners instead. Or hey, like with a theme list, how can I get this for free? Where does this come in with a theme list? Hey, if I play Haley 1, I can get this for free. That'd be awesome. So again, go into your list there. It's your own faction first. Find out the things you're not playing anyway, and if you've exhausted that with testing out everything in your faction, well, then try a different faction. You don't have to go out and even buy one. Just talk to one of your friends and like, hey, I'm being kind of burned out right now. How about we just trade for a little bit? You know, it won't be like an official thing. I'll just give you my Signar for a while to borrow, and I'll borrow your Kador or whatever it is, and we'll just play for, let's say, 3 months. We'll make this trade. And that can be something that's really interesting because it'll be fresh to you. You'll learn a new faction. You'll become a better player because you'll increase your knowledge. It'll just be that interesting. But again, when you're doing that, make sure you're going to something that's different from what you're doing. If you're playing all the time shooty, 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 well, don't go to Retribution and take a shooty list, right? If you're going and you're saying, hey, I'm going with Legion, I'm going Beast all the time, I want something different, well, don't go to Circle where you're going to be going after Beast all the time, right? Find something that's really, really different. And again, I mean, look at those other options. Now, we didn't talk about Burnout from the game, but this could also be part of this and part of the faction thing. It could just be that you need a break. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm just going to not go to tournaments for a little while because that competitive push is just killing me. I just want to play for fun for a while. That's fine. Do that. That way you'll have a lot less pressure on you, that if you do want to bring something crazy and different, just bring it to casual days and do that. Or, you know what, I know I got a tournament coming up in 2 months, I'm feeling the burnout, I want that tournament to be amazing, I'm going to take 1 month off. There'll be 1 month of no Warmachine, I'm going to go hiking, I'm going to beat this video game I've had in my backlog, and then that next month, I'm going to come back, my burnout will be over, and I'll be ready to prepare for that tournament, and then have lots of fun at that tournament, and hopefully do really well. So hopefully that answers the question there, but it's definitely something that always comes up, right? If you keep on doing the same thing long enough, you will get that burnout, and you just got to go and take that step back in whatever way it is, right? Whether it is just saying, okay, trying something different, or I'm going to try something new, or I'm just going to stop. Liam McConnell says, when is it a good, bad idea to back up your models so that they are more safe, but you'll be giving your opponent the potential for more control points? Well, the time that you want to be doing this is clearly not a time that they can win on scenario. So realize that you have a lot of different resources to you in the game. You have time, you have your models, you have health, but another one is scenario points. And you need 5 points currently to win. Maybe they'll change with future steamrollers, but that means if you give up 4 control points, you're still okay. You're in a very dangerous spot, and you better dedicate in there, but you can give up 4 control points and be totally fine as far as not automatically losing goes. So realize that you have that resource. Now, a time, like here's a good example. You're up against Lilith 2. You know Lilith 2 is going to 1-up and try and feed on you, and you're wondering if you should kill box yourself. You know, maybe you're not going to be just backing out of the zone, but your caster is going to go back, kill box themselves, give your opponent 2 control points, but all your guys are in the zone, and then the next turn they can run up and really tie up a lot of pieces so that that feat won't be as critical. Or maybe now all of your upkeep spells are out so you can camp a lot more. If that's the case, giving up those 2 points, definitely fine. Another one is how we talked about the Alpha Strike. If he's waiting for you to go into the zones so that they can then charge you and get that first one, you don't have to give that to them. You can say like, okay, I'm not going to those flags, but I'm going to set up here, and you can come in, you'll score 2 points or 3 points, who knows what it is, and then I'm going to counter. and I'm going to get up, I'm going to get the Alpha Strike, I'm going to now start tying up these scenarios, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're going to wish that you had not gone for that deal. And that's a really good, like, kind of like a bait you can put out there. It's like, oh, look, you could come in here and get to this flag, but then you can come back and get the jump on them. The big thing you want, though, is make it so it's not done trivially. If you are saying, okay, I backed away, you can come up to me now, and then a couple of like 1-point solos run up, and all of a sudden he's up 3 points, that's not good. That didn't really get you anything, unless, of course, you also stalled for like the feet or something like that as well, right? However, if it is something like, okay, you got all these heavies, you're going to smash me, I'm just going to go back a turn so you don't get to me, and then I'll flood up next turn, that can work. But again, it's that hard balance of knowing that if you give up those points, you have to be in, you know. I did that in my one previous game here at the tournament where I was up against Harbinger, and first turn was feet. Am I going to be rushing in there on feet? No, because I'll lose all my guys. So I gave up that turn of board space. Next turn, he goes up. Now, I could go up and smash my way into the zone, but then his heavies were ready to kill me. So I'm going to spend another turn doing attritioning, and I'm going to give points to him. And I did. And he went in, and he dominated and destroyed, and it was up 3 points. And now that's happened. All right, I have bought myself, I've given you scenario points to buy me passage through your feet. I've given you scenario points to make sure that I protect my beasts, and with that I have now gone and attrition. And now when I go in there, I can really attrition away the rest of your infantry, I can get to some of your heavies, and I'm going to put everything in the zone so that really if you can go and kill all my stuff to score again, I've really lost anyway. So that's really that balance you need to really have. And again, going back to that kill box thing, do realize that sometimes it's totally worth it to kill box yourself. If you're all over them, right? Let's say that the game, you're up against Kane 2, and you're all over him, you destroyed his army, you're starting to score on scenario points, and now you're looking to your caster to maybe do something to close it out. No, run away. Run away. Don't give Kane 2 any chance to assassinate you. Give him those 2 control points, and then just continue on winning, right? Realize that balance between what 2 control points can be and what surviving or having more attrition or the Alpha Strike can mean. So it is kind of a dangerous one, but if you can master that, you can get a lot better at the game. So there you go, guys. There's all the questions for this Warmachine 101. Again, I post this up every Friday on the Facebook page, so if you want to be part of the next one, go on to there, and we'll see you there next week. Bye.